The old fool finally learned to stay in his lane, my son-in-law Derek announced, raising his champagne glass as I lowered myself carefully into the chair at our New Year's Eve dinner table. Every movement sent sharp pains through my left shoulder and ribs. The bandages under my dress shirt pulled against the road rash that covered half my torso. My daughter Jennifer shot me a warning glance from across the table, then smiled at the assembled guests. Derek's parents, the Harrises, nodded approvingly. My younger daughter's family looked uncomfortable, but nobody said a word as Derek continued his toast. To Marcus, who finally understands that some activities are best left to younger men with steadier hands. He smirked, and a few nervous chuckles rippled around the table. I smiled and lifted my glass with my good arm. You're absolutely right, Derek. Someone definitely learned a valuable lesson this Christmas. It just wasn't who you think. His face went white. Let me back up 6 weeks, to the day after Thanksgiving, when this whole nightmare began. I'm Marcus Webb, 62 years old, recently retired from 30 years as a structural engineer for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. I've spent 3 decades inspecting bridges, calculating load weights, and identifying structural failures before they became catastrophes. Before that, I did 2 tours as a combat engineer in the Army, building and dismantling everything from field fortifications to improvised explosive devices. My wife Linda passed away 2 years ago from ovarian cancer. It was brutal, watching her fight for 18 months before the disease finally won. Jennifer, my oldest, flew in from Seattle every month to help. My younger daughter Sarah drove up from Baltimore every weekend. They were rocks for both of us. 6 months after Linda died, Jennifer moved back to Philadelphia. She said it was for a job opportunity, but I knew the truth. She was worried about her old man rattling around alone in the house where she grew up. We had dinner together twice a week. She'd bring groceries, we'd cook Linda's recipes, and for a few hours the house would feel alive again. Then she met Derek Patterson at some corporate networking event. He was a senior account manager at a pharmaceutical marketing firm, drove a leased BMW, wore expensive suits, and had the kind of polished confidence that comes from never having been truly tested by life. They dated for 8 months before he proposed at some fancy restaurant in Rittenhouse Square. I tried to be happy for her. I really did. But something about Derek set my teeth on edge from the first time I met him. The way he corrected people's grammar mid-conversation, how he'd check his phone while others were talking, the casual contempt in his voice when he mentioned people in lower-level positions, and most of all, the way he talked about money as if it were the only measure of a person's worth. Your dad seems like a good guy, he told Jennifer at that first dinner, his tone making it clear this was a generous assessment. I mean, for a government worker, civil servants are so essential, aren't they? Even if the pay is, well, you know. I let it slide. Linda had always been the confrontational one. I was the steady one, the one who kept the peace. Old habits die hard. The wedding was in October, a lavish affair at some country club in the mainline suburbs. Derek's parents, Gerald and Constance Patterson, owned a chain of urgent care clinics across the Delaware Valley. Old money, or at least old enough to look down their noses at new money, let alone no money. They made it clear throughout the reception that their son was marrying down. Jennifer's charming, Constance told me during the father-daughter dance, and we're sure she'll adapt well to our family's expectations. She sipped her wine. It's a bit of an adjustment, of course, going from a modest background to our social circle. But Derek assures us she's a fast learner. I smiled and said nothing, same as I'd been doing for months. The first month of their marriage seemed fine. Jennifer was happy. That was all that mattered. But by Thanksgiving, I started noticing changes. She'd lost weight. She seemed distracted during our dinners, anxious. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd insist it was just work, stress, or wedding debt, or adjusting to married life. The day after Thanksgiving, Derek called me directly for the first time since the wedding. Marcus, hey buddy, hope you had a great turkey day. Listen, I wanted to run something by you. Buddy. He'd never called me buddy before. He'd barely spoken to me at all, beyond polite small talk. I've been doing some financial planning, he continued, his voice warm and friendly in a way that immediately made me suspicious. Looking at retirement accounts, investments, that sort of thing. Jennifer mentioned you've got a pretty substantial 401k from all those years with PennDOT, plus Linda's life insurance payout. My jaw tightened. That's my business, Derek. Of course. Of course. I'm not trying to pry. It's just, well, Jennifer and I were talking about starting a family, and you know how expensive kids are these days. And with your pension, you're pretty set, right? So I thought maybe we could discuss some ways to maximize your portfolio while also helping us out with a down payment on a house. Something bigger, in a better school district. I'm comfortable where I am, I said carefully. Sure. But here's the thing. We were looking at this great property in Gladwin. Amazing schools, near my parents. Really the kind of place where our kids could thrive. We're just a bit short on the down payment. I was thinking, given your age and everything, if something happened to you, Jennifer would inherit anyway, right? So why not help us now, when we actually need it? The audacity left me speechless for a moment. Derek, I appreciate you thinking about your future, but that money is for my retirement and for emergencies. I worked 30 years for it. Right, but what are you spending it on? You live in that same old house, drive that ancient pickup truck. Linda's gone, Marcus. No offense, but what do you need all that money for? I hung up on him. 2 weeks later, Jennifer called in tears. Derek had opened several credit cards in her name without telling her. They were $15,000 in debt from the wedding and his business entertainment expenses. He'd assured her his Christmas bonus would cover it, but the bonus was half what he'd promised her. Dad, I don't know what to do, she sobbed. He keeps saying if we just had a house, if we could get out of this expensive apartment, we could get ahead. He's been so stressed about money. I feel like I'm failing him. My hands clenched around the phone. Jenny, you're not failing anyone. This isn't your responsibility. But I knew he had expenses when we got married. His car payment, his student loans, his lifestyle. I thought my salary would help. But he says we need more, that we need to build something together, and I don't know, Dad. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm being selfish, keeping my inheritance from Mom separate. Don't you dare give him that money, I said sharply. Your mother left that to you specifically, in her will, with her own words. It's yours, not marital property. She was quiet for a long moment. He says you're being controlling, that you're trying to keep me dependent on you instead of building a life with my husband. That's when I knew Derek had been working on her systematically, undermining her confidence, isolating her from me. It was classic manipulation, and I'd seen it before in friends' marriages, but seeing it happen to my own daughter made my blood run cold. Jennifer, I want you to listen to me very carefully, I said. I love you, I will always love you, and I will never try to control your life, but I will also never stop trying to protect you. If Derek needs money that badly, he can get a second job or sell that ridiculous car. What he can't do is pressure my daughter into handing over her dead mother's legacy. She hung up without saying goodbye. That was December 10th. I didn't hear from her for a week. Sarah told me Jennifer wasn't returning her calls either. When I drove to their apartment in Center City, Derek answered the door. She doesn't want to see you right now, Marcus. You really upset her with that controlling behavior. Maybe give her some space, yeah? Let her figure out her priorities. I want to hear that from her, I said. Well, she's not available. He started to close the door. I put my foot in the doorway. 30 years of construction sites had taught me how to hold my ground. Derek, I'm going to say this once. If you're keeping my daughter from contacting her family, if you're isolating her, that's abuse. I will not hesitate to. To what? Call the cops? She's a grown woman who's choosing her husband over her controlling father. That's what healthy adults do, Marcus. They leave their parents behind and start their own lives. He smiled coldly. Now get your foot out of my door before I call the police for trespassing. I left, but I also called a family lawyer the next day and explained the situation. She advised me to document everything and stay available for when Jennifer reached out. These situations often escalate, she warned. Be ready. 3 days later, Derek called again. His voice was friendly, almost apologetic. Marcus, hey, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I was out of line asking about your finances. That was inappropriate. I love Jennifer so much, and I want to give her the life she deserves. You know? I'm stressed about money, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. It sounded rehearsed. Okay, I said cautiously. I was actually hoping we could reset. Do some male bonding, just you and me. I've got this friend who owns a cabin up in the Poconos, near Lake Wallenpaupack. Beautiful area, great for ice fishing. I thought maybe we could go up this weekend, spend a couple days, talk things through man to man. What do you say? Every instinct I had screamed danger, but he had Jennifer. He controlled access to my daughter. If I refused, he'd tell her I was being difficult, driving a wedge between them. Ice fishing? I said. I haven't been in years. Perfect. It'll be great. We'll leave Saturday morning, come back Sunday evening. I'll handle all the details. Just bring warm clothes and an open mind. I agreed. But I also called Sarah and told her exactly where I was going and when I'd be back. I texted her the address Derek gave me, and I made sure my phone was fully charged and had my location sharing turned on. Saturday morning, Derek picked me up in his BMW at 6 a.m. He was cheerful, talkative, playing classic rock on the stereo as we headed north on I-476. We stopped at a Wawa in Allentown for coffee and breakfast sandwiches. He paid, insisted on it, made a show of treating me. You know, Marcus, I really have been thinking a lot about family, he said as we got back on the highway, about what it means to be a good husband, a good future father. My dad, he's always been about the business, about building something lasting. I want that too. But I also want Jennifer to be happy. And I know you're important to her. I appreciate that, I said, watching the landscape change from suburbs to hills to mountains. The thing is, though, she needs to be able to trust me, to know I can provide for her, give her security. And right now, with our finances so tight, she's stressed all the time. It's putting a strain on us. He glanced at me. I thought maybe if you could help us out, even alone, it would take that pressure off. Let us get on solid footing. I'd pay you back, of course, with interest. How much are we talking? 50,000 would change our lives. We could get out of debt, have a cushion, maybe even make that down payment I mentioned. I'd spent 30 years calculating structural loads, stress points, and failure thresholds. I'd spent 2 years in combat zones learning to read people's intentions from body language and tone. And every bit of that experience was telling me that Derek Patterson was building towards something, and it wasn't a healthy father-in-law relationship. Let me think about it, I said. Fair enough. He smiled and turned up the radio. We reached the cabin around 10:30. It was remote, set back a quarter mile from the main road on a dirt driveway that wound through thick pines. The lake was frozen solid, gray ice stretching to the far shore. The cabin itself was rustic but well-maintained, a 2-story A-frame with a deck overlooking the water. My buddy Ted uses this for hunting season, Derek explained as he unlocked the door. But he said we could have it for the weekend. Pretty sweet setup, right? Inside was cold. Derek fiddled with the thermostat, cursing under his breath. Weird, the heat should have kicked on when I texted him we were close. Let me check the breaker. He disappeared into what looked like a utility closet. I heard him banging around. While he was occupied, I walked through the cabin, doing what I'd done on countless job sites, assessing the structure, noting the details. The main floor was open concept, kitchen and living room combined, stone fireplace, wood stove in the corner, stairs leading to a loft bedroom. Everything looked solid except... I ran my hand along the stair railing. It wobbled, not just loose, but deliberately loosened. I could see where screws had been backed out just enough to compromise stability, but not enough to be obvious. My pulse quickened. I moved to examine the stairs themselves. The third step from the bottom had a fine crack running across the riser, fresh sawdust in the crack. Someone had cut most of the way through the support underneath, then covered it with a thin layer of wood filler and dust. Heat's not working. Derek emerged from the utility closet, looking frustrated. Piece of shit furnace. I'll text Ted, see if he knows what's up. Meantime, we can use the wood stove. There's plenty of firewood stacked out back. He headed outside. I immediately pulled out my phone to call Sarah. No signal. I checked the Wi-Fi. No network available. I walked to every corner of the cabin. Nothing. Derek came back in carrying an armload of wood. Cell service is shit out here, right? That's kind of the point, though. Disconnect from the world. Just be present. Very zen. He started building a fire in the wood stove. I watched him work. Watched how he kept glancing at me, gauging my reaction. This was a man who'd done his homework. He'd planned this carefully. "Why don't you head upstairs and get settled?" he suggested. "Pick whichever bed you want. I'll get this fire going and make us some lunch." I climbed the stairs slowly, testing each step with my foot before putting my full weight on it. The third step flexed ominously. The railing nearly gave way when I gripped it. I kept going, mind racing. The loft had 2 single beds and a bathroom. I checked the bathroom window. 15-foot drop to the ground. No easy way down. I opened my phone again. Still, no signal. I tried to send a text to Sarah anyway, hoping it would go through eventually when we got closer to a tower. At cabin, something wrong. Derek acting strange. Call police if you don't hear from me by Sunday night. The message sat there with a not delivered indicator. I heard Derek moving around downstairs, opening cabinets, clattering dishes. I went to the top of the stairs and called down. "I'm going to use the bathroom. Then I'll be down. Take your time." I didn't use the bathroom. Instead, I took photos of everything. The loose railing, the sabotaged step, the missing cell signal on my phone. I photographed the view from each window, establishing my location as best I could. Then I opened my phone settings and turned on airplane mode. If Derek somehow had a way to track when I tried to use my phone, I didn't want him to know I was documenting everything. When I came downstairs, Derek had set out sandwich fixings on the counter. He smiled. "Hope turkey's okay. Figured we had enough at Thanksgiving." "But it's easy." We made sandwiches. We ate. We made small talk about the Eagles' season, about whether we'd get a white Christmas. The whole time, I was doing calculations. If I confronted him, what would he do? If I tried to leave, would he stop me? How far was he willing to go? After lunch, he suggested we take a walk down to the lake, check out the ice conditions. Ted said the ice is about 8 inches thick now, perfect for fishing. We can drill some holes, set up some tip-ups this afternoon. "Sounds good," I said. "Let me grab my heavier coat from the truck first." "Oh, I moved your bag inside earlier. It's by the door." I hadn't seen him touch my bag. My keys were in the bag. I walked over, unzipped it. Keys were gone. "Derek," I said calmly, "where are my truck keys?" He looked up from his phone, the picture of innocent confusion. "What keys?" "My truck keys. They were in my bag. Must have fallen out." "Check the truck." "Maybe you left them in the ignition?" I walked outside. The truck was locked. Keys weren't in the ignition. I came back inside. "They're not there." Derek patted his pockets. "Weird. Well, I've got my keys, so we're good. We can look for yours later. Probably just in the truck somewhere." He knew exactly where they were, and he wasn't planning to let me use them. We walked down to the lake. The ice was indeed thick, smooth, and gray. Derek had brought ice fishing gear, a hand auger for drilling holes, a bucket of tip-ups. We drilled 6 holes in a line parallel to the shore, about 50 feet out. The ice groaned and creaked with temperature changes, but it was solid. Derek was explaining how to set the tip-ups when I noticed his phone in his jacket pocket. He'd been checking it periodically, despite claiming there was no signal. That meant either he was checking the time, or he had signal and had lied about it. "Can I borrow your phone?" I asked casually. "Want to try to text Jennifer? Let her know we made it okay." "Oh, sure." He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, then frowned. "Damn, battery's almost dead. Must have forgot to charge it last night. Probably won't make it through the day. Better save it for emergencies, you know." He pocketed it again. We fished for 2 hours. Caught nothing. The temperature was dropping as the sun moved lower. Derek suggested we head back, warm up, have some dinner. We walked back to the cabin as daylight faded. That's when I made my decision. Whatever Derek was planning, it was going to happen tonight. The sabotage stairs suggested he wanted it to look like an accident. An old man, unfamiliar cabin, maybe had a few drinks, Missed his footing in the dark, fell down the stairs, broke his neck. Tragic, but accidents happen. Except I wasn't going to give him the chance. Inside, Derek made a show of cooking dinner. Spaghetti with sauce from a jar. He opened a bottle of red wine. Figured we could have a few drinks. Relax. Really talk. That's what this weekend is about, right? Connection. He poured 2 glasses, handed me one. I pretended to sip it, but barely let any pass my lips. He drank his normally. We ate dinner. We talked about surface-level things. Sports, weather, politics. Nothing real. Nothing about Jennifer, or money, or his plans. After dinner, he poured himself another glass of wine. Offered to top mine off. I declined. Said I was tired. Wanted to turn in early. He looked disappointed, but didn't argue. Sure. Big day tomorrow. Ted said there's a bald eagle nest on the North Shore. Thought we could hike over there in the morning. Sound good? Sounds great, I lied. I went upstairs, turned on the bedroom light, waited 5 minutes. Then I quietly opened my bag and pulled out the small LED headlamp I always carried for job site inspections. I also found my multi-tool, a folding knife with a 3-inch blade. Not much, but better than nothing. I turned off the bedroom light, waited in the dark, listening. Downstairs I heard Derek moving around, washing dishes, banking the fire in the wood stove. Then, silence. Then the distinctive sound of the wood stove door opening again, and something being tossed inside. Paper, by the sound of it. Burning evidence of something. I gave it another 30 minutes. Then, moving as silently as 30 years of construction sites and 2 army tours had taught me, I came down the stairs. I avoided the 3rd step entirely, straddling it, keeping my weight on the railing's mounting points rather than the rail itself. Derek was in the single bedroom on the main floor, door closed. I could hear him snoring. Either he was a heavy sleeper, or he'd had more wine than I'd realized. I checked the wood stove. Still warm, embers glowing. In the ash, I saw the remains of what looked like credit card receipts and a handwritten note. Burned too thoroughly to read, but I photographed the ash anyway. Then I searched the cabin systematically. In the utility closet, I found the breaker box. Someone had deliberately tripped the breaker for the furnace and then taped it in the off position. I photographed that too. In Derek's overnight bag, which he'd left in the living room, I found my truck keys. I also found a small bottle of prescription medication. Ambien, sleeping pills. Not prescribed to Derek, but to someone named Theodore Hutchins. His friend Ted, presumably. The bottle was nearly full, but 2 pills were missing. I photographed everything. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A printed email, folded in Derek's toiletry bag. It was from a life insurance agent, confirming that Derek had been named as a secondary beneficiary on my policy through Penn DOT, behind Jennifer. The date was from 3 weeks ago. I'd never authorized that. But Jennifer, as my next of kin, had the authority to add secondary beneficiaries if I'd signed the right paperwork, which meant Derek had forged my signature or convinced Jennifer to do it without telling me. The policy was worth $500,000. Double that for accidental death. I stood there in the dark cabin, holding that email, and understood completely. Derek needed money. I wouldn't give it to him, so he'd arranged this trip, sabotaged the cabin, stolen my keys, and planned to make my death look like an accident. Jennifer would get the life insurance. Derek would console her, help her through her grief, and eventually convince her to use that money for their life together. And I'd be dead. I went back to the bedroom, took more photos. Then I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, except I kept my truck keys. I put them in my pocket. I spent the rest of the night in the loft bedroom, door barricaded with a chair, knife open on the nightstand. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every creak of the cabin settling, every gust of wind made me jump. Derek woke at dawn. I heard him moving around, making coffee, humming to himself. I waited until he called up the stairs, cheerful and loud. "Marcus, coffee's ready. We should get moving if we want to see those eagles." I came downstairs, carrying my bag. Actually, I'm not feeling great. I think I'm coming down with something. Probably should head back early. His face darkened for just a moment before the smile returned. Oh man, that sucks. Yeah, of course, we can head back. Let me just clean up here, pack my stuff. Give me 20 minutes? Sure, but I didn't wait inside. I took my bag straight to my truck, unlocked it with my recovered keys, and put the bag in the bed. Then I went back inside, but I stayed near the door, watching Derek through the kitchen pass-through. He was on his phone, typing furiously. The phone that supposedly had a dead battery. After a moment, he put it away and looked up. Ready to go? Whenever you are. We packed up the cabin. Derek made a show of checking that everything was turned off, locked up properly. We got in his BMW. He started driving back toward the highway, but something felt wrong. He was too calm, too friendly, asking me questions about my symptoms, whether I'd had breakfast, whether I needed to stop anywhere. We were about 5 miles from the cabin, on a winding mountain road with steep drop-offs, when he suddenly swerved. Whoa, did you see that deer? There'd been no deer, but the swerve had put us dangerously close to the guardrail. Derek, watch the road, I said calmly. Sorry. These mountain roads, man. Treacherous. He sped up slightly. We came around a curve, and he swerved again, this time toward the opposite shoulder, toward the drop-off with no guardrail. I grabbed the door handle. Derek, slow down. I'm fine. Just, that deer spooked me. But he didn't slow down. If anything, he accelerated. We came around another curve. This time I saw him glance at me, saw him calculating, and I knew. If the cabin hadn't worked, if the stairs hadn't worked, then a car accident would have to do. He'd drive us off the road, aim for a tree or a drop-off, and hope the crash would kill me while leaving him injured but alive. Pull over, I said quietly. What? Why? Pull over right now, or I'm calling 911. I pulled out my phone. We were close enough to civilization now that I had 2 bars of signal. His hands tightened on the wheel. For a long moment, I thought he was going to do it anyway. Just floor it, aim for the biggest tree, and take his chances. But he'd seen that I had my phone out, that I was ready to call for help. If he crashed now, first responders would find evidence that I'd been trying to get help before the crash. It would look suspicious. He pulled over onto a scenic overlook turnout, put the car in park, turned to look at me with an expression that was no longer friendly. What's your problem, Marcus? My problem is that you tried to kill me. That's insane. You're paranoid. This is exactly what Jennifer warned me about. You can't handle her being married, can't handle not being the center of her world, so you're lashing out at me. I pulled out my phone, opened my photo gallery, showed him the pictures of the sabotage stairs, the disabled furnace breaker, the life insurance email. His face went very still. I documented everything, I said quietly. The stairs, the railings, my truck keys in your bag, the Ambien that isn't prescribed to you, that email about the life insurance I never authorized. And I sent copies to my lawyer and my other daughter before we even got to the cabin. I hadn't, actually, because of the no signal issue. But he didn't know that. If anything happens to me, ever, they'll know exactly where to look. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Those stairs could have been loose for months. The furnace could have malfunctioned. The keys could have fallen into my bag by accident. The insurance thing, Jennifer added me. It's perfectly legal. Maybe. But here's what I know for certain. If you ever come near me again, if you ever threaten me or manipulate my daughter or try any variation of this scheme, I will go to the police. I will go to the press. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are. Your parents, your employer, your friends, everyone. He stared at me. I could see him weighing his options, calculating whether I was bluffing. And one more thing, I added. I'm telling Jennifer everything, tonight. You can try to convince her I'm crazy, that I'm making it all up. But I think she'll believe me, especially when I show her the evidence. Especially when I tell her about the life insurance beneficiary change that she probably signed without reading carefully while you were handling the paperwork for her. His hands were shaking now. With rage or fear, I couldn't tell. You'll ruin my marriage. No, Derek. You did that yourself. I got out of the car, started walking back toward the cabin, toward my truck that I'd deliberately left there, knowing I might need an escape route. Behind me, I heard Derek's BMW start up. For a moment, I thought he might try to run me down, but he didn't. He drove past me, fast, tires squealing on the curves as he disappeared toward the highway. It took me 40 minutes to walk back to the cabin. I got in my truck and drove straight to the state police barracks in Milford, asked to speak to a detective, showed them everything I'd documented, explained the whole situation. They were skeptical at first. A domestic dispute, they called it. Family drama. But when I showed them the sabotage stairs, the forged insurance documents, the pattern of manipulation, one detective sat up straighter. "Mr. Webb, this sounds like attempted murder with insurance fraud. That's serious. But proving intent is difficult without more evidence." Did he admit anything? He didn't have to. The evidence speaks for itself. They took my statement, took copies of my photos, said they'd investigate. I drove home to Philadelphia, stopping every hour to check in with Sarah, to let her know I was safe. I got home around 7 that evening. Jennifer was sitting on my front porch steps, crying. "Dad," she said when she saw me. "Oh my God, Dad. I'm so sorry. Derek came home 2 hours ago. He was furious. He told me you'd accused him of terrible things, that you'd tried to sabotage our marriage, but he was acting so strange, and I started asking questions, and he got angrier and angrier, and then he said," she sobbed, "he said if you'd just died like you were supposed to, everything would have been fine. He didn't realize I'd heard him. He was on the phone in the other room. I recorded it on my phone." She showed me. There was Derek's voice, clear as day, talking to someone, maybe his father, saying, "The old bastard figured it out. He's got evidence. I don't know how he survived, but he's going to ruin everything. Maybe I can still fix this. If I can get to him before he goes to the cops." I held my daughter while she cried. When she could speak again, she told me everything. How Derek had been pressuring her for months about my money. How he'd convinced her to sign papers she didn't fully read, including the life insurance beneficiary change. How he'd isolated her from her friends and family, made her doubt her own judgment. How she'd been so miserable but felt trapped, felt like she'd failed at marriage if she left after only 2 months. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I should have listened to you. I should have seen what he was." "You were in love," I said, "and he was very good at manipulation. This isn't your fault." We called the police together, played them Jennifer's recording. Combined with my evidence and now with Jennifer's testimony about the forged documents and coercion, they had enough for an arrest warrant. Derek was arrested 3 days later. He was charged with attempted murder, insurance fraud, and forgery. His lawyer tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that the cabin maintenance issues were pre-existing, that Derek had been trying to help me with my finances, not steal from me, but the evidence was overwhelming, especially when investigators found Derek's internet search history, how to cause fatal fall down stairs, life insurance payout for accidental death, how long does Ambien take to work, and remote cabins near Lake Wallenpaupack. Jennifer filed for divorce. Derek's parents hired expensive lawyers, tried to make it all go away, but the facts were stubborn. Derek had tried to kill his father-in-law for insurance money. There was no spin that could make that look good. The trial was scheduled for March, but Derek took a plea deal. 7 to 15 years for attempted murder, restitution for legal fees, and a permanent restraining order, keeping him away from both Jennifer and me. Which brings me back to New Year's Eve. We'd planned a family dinner, just Jennifer, Sarah, Sarah's husband and kids, and me. Then Jennifer surprised me. "Dad, I know this sounds crazy, but I want Derek's parents to come. I want them to see what their son tried to do. I want them to look me in the eye and acknowledge it." I didn't think they'd accept. But Constance Patterson called 3 days before New Year's and said yes, they'd come. She sounded broken. "We need to understand," she said. "We need to know what happened to our son." So there we were, New Year's Eve. The Pattersons arrived dressed like they were attending a funeral. Maybe they were, in a way, the funeral of their illusions about their son. We sat down to dinner. Gerald Patterson offered a toast. To new beginnings, he said stiffly, and to acknowledging the harm our family has caused. It was Jennifer who told the story. All of it. The manipulation, the money pressure, the forged documents, the murder plot. I watched the Pattersons' faces as their daughter-in-law described what their son had done. Constance started crying halfway through. Gerald just stared at his plate. When Jennifer finished, there was silence. Then Gerald spoke. We raised him to value success, to achieve, to win. But we never taught him to value people, to respect them. And for that, his voice broke. For that, we owe you an apology, both of you. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. After they left, Jennifer hugged me tight. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for staying alive. Sweetheart, I said, I'm a structural engineer. I spend my life identifying failures before they collapse. I wasn't about to miss the signs in my own family. She laughed through her tears. You know what the worst part is? I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been so careful. If you hadn't documented everything. If you'd just trusted him. But I didn't, I said firmly. And you're safe. That's all that matters. She moved back in with me for a few months, while the divorce finalized. We cooked Linda's recipes. We talked about everything and nothing. Slowly, she started to heal. Derek sent letters from prison. Jennifer never opened them. She had them forwarded directly to her lawyer. 6 months later, Jennifer met someone new. A teacher, quiet and kind, who treated her with respect and never once asked about her finances. They took it slow. I approved. As for me, I'm still here, still driving my ancient truck, still living in the same house, still checking bridges for structural failures, and still reminding my daughters that experience, caution, and the ability to read a situation can be more valuable than any amount of money. Derek was wrong about one thing. The old man didn't need to learn a lesson, but he certainly taught one. Some bridges look solid until you know where to check for cracks. Some people are the same way. The trick is knowing what to look for before the whole structure comes crashing down.